Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a drink. It is time for some PathOfExile 1 discussion. Today, we're going to be talking about drop rates. Primarily, we're going to be talking about drop rates for the Betrayal mechanics, and some of the research that's been done by players, because grinding gear games have a policy of not really publishing drop rates very often, and as a result, the vast majority of things that the player base ever works out about drop rates comes from someone going and running things a lot of times, or occasionally from a large group of people getting together and running a very controlled test. But today, when it comes to Syndicate safe houses, which is probably the thing people will be most interested in here, we're going to be looking at research that was done by Rainy Devils, posted over on the PathOfExile subreddit, which I'll put a link to down in the description below. This thread didn't get nearly as much traction as it deserves because there's a lot of information in it. Now, with Betrayal, there's a number of different items that you get there. The thing that's most important from a Trade League player's perspective is definitely the Syndicate Medallions. But if you're playing in solo self-found, you're probably really interested in the uniques, and you're also very interested in the Veiled Chaos Orbs. Veiled Chaos Orbs are really good, but they're something that in a trade league, there's plenty of around, so they're not super expensive. At the same time, there's also the Allflame Embers, which is something grinding gear games designed in order to make sure there was a reason to keep coming back to Betrayal content. Very important to note, Rainy Devils used an advanced strategy for interacting with Betrayal that guaranteed that every time they were doing a safe house, the leader of that safe house had 3 stars. This might be important. It's not absolutely clear as yet, but it looks like it probably is, so keep that in mind. So let's have a look at the main drops and what we can actually say about them. Veiled Chaos Orb, drop rate very close to 50% there. Probably actually is 50%, but we don't know exactly. The Syndicate Medallion though, this is the expensive one. These things have been going for 7, 8, 9 divines depending upon the day of the week. 121 of these. I'll say this twice, I'll say it once in statistical mumbo jumbo, but for those of you without a statistics background, I'll explain later. For those of you with a statistics background, this is 2 sigma evidence that the drop rate is strictly more than 10% and strictly less than 15%. So for those of you that prefer English to mumbo jumbo statistics language, what this means is that one of 3 things is true. Either the drop rate is at least 10.22% and at most 14.27%. So that's the first possibility. The second possibility is that the original poster of this thread had top 1 in 40 luck. So they were really, really lucky, and the real drop rate is less than 10.22%. The third possibility is the original poster of this thread had bottom 1 in 40 luck, so they were really unlucky, RNG frowned upon them, and the real drop rate is more than 14.27%. Which of these 3 is true, statistics can't say. But what we can say is that it's probably something around 12%. On top of that, there's also the Veiled Uniques. Now, the Veiled Uniques are interesting. There's a little bit of evidence here that they have different drop rates to each other, but this is actually not enough to be certain yet. So, Hyperboreus, the belt, 6.9% it appears to be, 31 drops from 447 of the appropriate safe house. Hyperboreus not particularly sought after. Because of the advanced Betrayal strategy that was used here, absolutely no fortification safe houses were run, so no data on Crimson Storm. In the research safe houses, only 3 Vivinsects were looted from 163. Now you might look at that and think, oh, well that surely means that it's a 2% drop rate at most. But the reality is that because there's only 3 examples here and we were only expecting 8 if there were 5%, it's actually not enough evidence to rule out 5%. It's probably less than 5%, but we don't have that 2 sigma level proof. Or to put it in non-stats terms, if the real drop rate is 5%, you don't actually need a 1 in 40 unlucky streak in order to only see 3 Vivinsects. You would see that more often than once in 40 runs. In the intervention safe houses where Paradoxica is the unique, there were 15 that dropped from 390 runs. And this is probably the most important of those uniques because it's the one that certainly sees the most play. Of course, 15 of them is not necessarily going to include even one that's exactly perfect for the build you're playing. Now, if you're interested in more details on this, I will put a link down in the description below to Rainy Devil's thread because there's more information there. Allflame Members are next. You're guaranteed to get one if you've got a 3-star general leading a safe house. And here, it looks like, although this again is not proven, we might have a 4 to 3 to 2 to 2 to 1 ratio. So 1/3 of the time, or 4 in 12, you get a Wildwood Ember. 1/4 of the time, or 3 in 12, you get a Toad Ember. 1/6 of the time, you get a Gilded Ember. This is probably one that you're pretty excited to see. 1/6 of the time, you get a Flesh Ember. And 1/12 of the time, you get an Ethereal Ember. But again, this isn't super certain on any of these, and the actual error bars are reasonably big. So that's the safe house elements. What about Catarina herself, the Master of Undeath, the leader of the Syndicate? Well, there's been a whole bunch of data that's been generated over more than 1,000 runs of Catarina, and there's a fair bit of information that we've been able to get. Something like 1 in 3 times you'll get yourself a Cinderswallow Worm. Spinehail, the new quiver that was added this league, is the second most common unique. Then we've got Devouring Diadem, which was very, very, very rare in the last patch, so it seems to have had a buff to its drop rate. Then we've got Bitterbind Point and Queen's Hunger are the rarer ones. Now, Kena Coolamak comes in 2 different varieties. The version that has 3 Veiled mods is not particularly rare. The version that has 4 Veiled mods, however, is. The drop rate on Veiled Exalted Orb could be 25%, but I don't think we can rule out 30% yet. I do think we can rule out 20%, but it could be something weird as well. So it could be something like 22.751%. That we can't rule out, but it's probably 25%, but it still could be 30% at the moment. Allflame Member of Resplendence, 60%. Coolamak, 60%, Propagation, 30%. Yes, you will get more than one of these on average. And then there's a Divination card, Nook's Crown. Now, I actually disagree with the Wiki team's assessment here. They say that it is less than 1 in 1,000. This card is crazy rare from Catarina, but I don't think we can prove it's quite that rare yet. What I can say is that it is definitely less than 1 in 200. We have 2 Sigma evidence to that effect, but we don't have anything more than that. You will also get rare items with 2 Veiled modifiers, which can be good, but most of the time they're not. So that is what we've learned recently about the Catarina fight and also about the Betrayal system in general. However, there is one more important drop rate that we've learned a little bit about. Earlier in the league, I did a guide to map scrying, and one of the maps that came up as a potential high point, one of the better ones to scry, was Basilica. Now, one of the things that might pull you into running Basilica or into scrying it onto something else is the Divination Card Damnation. Now, by analysing what we could tell from Faustus's gold cost to transfer this card, it seemed like it was the same rarity as the Father's Love Divination card, which is about 1.8 times as rare as the Divination card, the Apothecary. However, there has been a little bit of further research into this. When I say research, I'm talking someone who has very, very, very doggedly run maps that have been scried of Basilica. And from this, I'm now starting to think that Grindy Games might have made Damnation rarer than Faustus indicates. This is not proven, but we have 2.5 Sigma evidence indicating that Damnation is rarer than Faustus would indicate. How much rarer than that, we don't really know. Just to say that our current estimates as to the drop rate of this card are a little bit uncertain. The reason I say this is that if you've run Basilica or any map that's scried off it, you have definitely looted Demigod's Wager, or perhaps you've not put it on your loot filter. Well, the player who did an enormous amount of testing of this, they have looted more than 1,000 copies of Demigod's Wager. And based on that, we projected they should probably have looted 6 or 7 copies of the Damnation Divination card. However, they looted exactly 1. Now, because of the small sample size here, that's not enough to say confidently that it is actually 10 times rarer than we projected. It might only be 50% rarer than we projected, and then the person who was doing the testing got unlucky. That's entirely possible. But again, for those of you with a stats background, this is 2.5 Sigma evidence that Damnation is rarer than we previously thought. For those of you without that, what this means is one of 2 things. Either the person who did all the testing got roughly 1 in 200, 1 in 300 bad luck, or it is rarer than we speculated earlier. We don't know which of those is the case. Ultimately, only more testing will make that clear. Anyways, that's a whole bunch of information on drop rates, something that Grindy Games do tend to keep pretty secretive. I'm going to leave it there. May your Varlorbs have interesting results, and may bosses drop you interesting loot.